very warm welcome to this second episode of our show Road to Vote 24, where we bring you debates, panel discussions and interviews as we build up to Election Day on Wednesday, the 29th of May. I'm your host, Vuyo Mvoko, and let's be on our way. South Africa's smallest province by land size is by far the biggest in so many other respects. Gauteng's 33.1% contribution to the GDP is not only the biggest, but bigger than those of KwaZulu-Natal, of the Western Cape and Limpopo combined. But if you look, of course, at unemployment in the country's economic engine, it remains stubbornly high at about 33.8%. And this, of course, being the province with one of the highest numbers of registered voters at 6.5 million. The province has 6.5 million eligible voters, are saying, the bulk of whom voted for the three parties that are going to be represented in studio here this afternoon. Now, of the 73 seats that are up for grabs, in the Gauteng provincial legislature, the ANC has 37 of those seats, the lowest number that the ANC has polled since 1994. It is, of course, followed by the DA with 20, down by 3 seats from the previous election. The EFF has 11, 3 seats up from the previous election, and the FF Plus has 3, and the IFP and the ACDP have 1 seat each. Which brings us to today's online poll question. Do you believe the ANC will get a simple majority in Gauteng in this election? That's the question we are asking you today. You can reply yes or no, or say a coalition will govern if that's what you believe.
Because your vote is a voice, so it's important to vote khona iqembu leli thina silifunayo lizogena elingafundakala lizophuma, like, so that change can come.
I just want changes, and then I just want all the youth from the streets to be employed, like, yeah.
Let's vote because I changes. I know I'm supposed to contribute with my vote, but I give vote. I'm not.
Vote because you must have a say, and you can have a say only if you vote.
I am born as one. I am born. Things of vote. I am born the things of vote. I know what my was saying. I was was synthesis thing about so very obvious. Nati you think manja sevenzi sasokola yabona na my nabanye babona 350, but still yasokoli.
Yeah, it's a vote because it's my right, it's my democracy. Vote against not, and it will off my freedom. Vote so vote kulapho sizokwazi basifumana create more opportunities zemisebenzi nabantwana ubheke ezikolweni babe ne free education, and also nabantu abadala babe ne free education. Like who vote nje is more important.
Please welcome our panelists for today's show. Bandile Masuku, formerly the province's health MEC and now chairperson of the provincial legislature's Community Safety Committee. He is representing the governing ANC. Representing the official opposition, the DA, is Refilwe Nteke, also a member of the provincial legislature. And the empty chair next to me is supposed to be occupied by a representative of the EFF. Good afternoon to both of you. Thanks very much for coming through.
Good afternoon.
Really,
Good afternoon to you and the viewers.
Appreciate it. It is, of course, the battle for the economic hub of the country, which, as I said in my opening remarks, has, even though it has this huge share, or responsible for the huge share of the country's GDP, but when it comes to the creation of jobs, it is up there with the worst. Doc?
Good evening, and to your viewers and yourself. And maybe first from the side of the ANC, we'll need to pass our special sincere condolences to the PAC on the passing away of Ntate Motsopo. I think he was a great scholar, contributed a great deal in our struggle against apartheid. I think besides the, coming back to your question, besides that the Gauteng plays a tremendous role in the economy of the country and of Africa, because you will remember and recall that if Gauteng was regarded as a country, it will be amongst the top 10 economies in the in the continent. So we have come up with ways and means to try and utilize what is in our hands to try and create jobs, and we are utilizing the space that we are in as a governing party to not even talk about what we'll do after elections, but we start now doing it from last year, with our program of creating jobs, which is a major part of the economic recovery of the of the country. And of the
what
province.
Is that program?
The Nice Hispanic program is part of our elevated priorities, as Premier Banyaza Lusufias came in, has prioritized creating jobs and even utilizing, the posts that have been vacant in our system, in our public service, to make sure that they are filled, and it also helps to enhance service delivery.
Master Spani, is it the answer to the Gauteng's economic, unemployment challenges?
Absolutely not, because it's not a funded mandate, as we know, because as it is, Treasury has said, all governments must tighten the belt. To give you an example, social development had a 5.5 billion rand budget last year. This time, they're coming with 5.4. So where you're going to find that additional fund to create employment, that is not the place to go. Secondly, parts of the adverts that have gone out with Nasa Spani are actually in violation of the Electoral Act, because they ask people to come with proof of voting stations where they are registered. So if somebody chooses to actually implement their democratic right and say, I'm not voting, these jobs discriminate against them, they cannot apply.
Is that the case, though?
It's not the case, and I think it's not part of the criteria. I think everyone who's a citizen of Gauteng specifically and particularly are allowed to apply for jobs. The only thing that is important is also to get a sense of the people that are within the participation of our own electoral system, if they are, actually registered. I think part of it is to encourage some of our, citizens to register when the registration dates were open. But now it's not the case that it is, a criteria.
Where did you get your information?
It's from an ad that was posted in my constituency, Tembisa, where I'm on the service delivery groups, that actually one of the criteria was for you to show that you're registered in a particular voting station.
Well, we'll see if we can verify that information. But Doc, in all seriousness, Nasa Spani can never be the answer to the economic hub's a problem. For example, and this is an issue that one had, for example, following the MEC of Finance's budget this year, where there was a lot of focus on the townships. But if you look at what townships can realistically do, because what people in the townships do, whether it's a spaza shop, whether it's a meat stand, whether it's a car wash, or a shibin, they do, or they get into those activities out of desperation. It's their way of earning a living, but hardly the township economy cannot really realistically drive the economy of this province.
It's not really the issue of driving the economy, but it's an important aspect that the majority of the citizens of Gauteng do reside in the, in townships. And it's important that part of the budget spend that we have as government should be spent within these particular areas, your townships, your informal settlements, and your hostels, because that's where the bulk of the majority of our citizens are, and that's where most of them are affected and implicated by these dire situations. I do take your point but there are businesses that are running from townships that do play a role in supply chain, particularly in relation to supplying goods, and I think it's something that we should continue to encourage. In other municipalities, they do have business hubs where they house some of these businesses that do some of this intricate supply of goods in our,
And one is not for a second, suggesting that, they have no role to play and the township economy shouldn't be looked at. But what is the alternative that the DA is putting on the table? Do you have a plan for Gauteng, if you were, of course, to be elected a government?
Absolutely. We've already been in government in one province, which, by the way, already generated 80% of the jobs in South Africa. There are issues with your Western Cape example, and in the interest of time, I want you to articulate your economic vision for Gauteng. We are very clear that in order to create, for example, I want to say to Doc here, the fact that on the R21 you're seeing a lot of warehouses, it means we're importing as a nation. We're not building industry. So this is for us to be able to import stuff and store it and then put it into the South African economy. What we should be doing, I live in Ekurhuleni, as everybody knows. We should be industrializing Ekurhuleni as an example to make sure that we stimulate growth.
What exactly do you mean by that?
We've got a lot of white elephant industries that have basically closed down in Ekurhuleni. If those were opened again to stimulate growth, we would actually have more people employed. One of the things that we need to do is we need to work on building our infrastructure, making sure we replace substations, we replace water. For example, in parts of Western Cape, when you've replaced a pipe 3 times, you know that you need to completely replace it because you can't keep fixing it. So we need to sort out our infrastructure. We need to fight water shedding. And we need to ensure that we fight load shedding. Because load shedding is encouraging investors to leave South Africa.
But assuming you do all those things, what is it that you're putting on the table saying, and then we do A, B, C, and D?
Once you've actually said we can keep the lights on, we can keep the roads running without potholes, we can actually have water coming into your business, then the responsibility of government is to get investors to come and build companies. Let me give you an example. When I was the mayoral candidate of Ekurhuleni, I learned that a company that could have employed 3,000 South Africans left to Mozambique because of load shedding. That's 3,000 job opportunities, not opportunities as an EPWP, proper opportunities where people would have had full-time salaries with not contract but full-time paid, lost to South Africa.
By the admission of the Minister of, the MEC for Finance, the business is complaining bitterly about crime levels and security.
It is a big problem, but we also have to understand, my particular concern in discussions such as this is the particular oversimplification of problems that we have as a country. People throw around the issue of, say, water shedding, not to even contextualize the issue that the country itself is a water-scarce country. And all of us as a country, we should find ways and means to deal with it. And crime, for an example, is one of those that we oversimplify. And we know that it's not an issue of statistics alone, but it's an issue that there is a big factor of a socio-economic factor that drives crime, that we still have to deal with it. We can still put a lot of boots on the ground. We can create visibility, but we have to give a better and outlook, comprehensive response to the socio-economic situation, which will deal with crime. But crime is getting out of hand. I think it's one of our major concerns that has been elevated to our priorities as Gauteng.
Do you have a plan to deal with it, irrespective of its origins or the causal factors?
Yes, the plan is there. I think we've started to, particularly in Gauteng, we have started to implement our plan, thinking outside the box. I think one of them is the utilization of technology to make sure that it increases the span and the visibility of our policing. The other one is increasing the boots on the ground in terms of our Amapanyaza, your crime prevention wardens, which are ward-based and supposed to be visible in our townships and in our ward. And the third leg is general supporting the South African Police Service as Gauteng government to add on to their mobility in terms of the vehicles, to add on in terms of their visibility. So these are part of the things that we are not planning to do. We are doing them now because we know that we are in a continuous state of transforming and innovating to make sure that we respond to the cries of our people.
Do you have a plan for fighting crime in Gauteng?
Yes, we do. I think one of the things that the DA is fighting for is to say that we need to bring policing closer to the people. And after taking over, the intention is to fight for a devolution of the police services. And there's so many areas. He's right when he says it's not a simple thing, but there is a reality where crime can also be addressed by also looking at a whole of society approach. Already you need to bring in your private security companies, your CPFs, structures and neighborhood watches to also build and become those additional boots on the ground, which, by the way, should have also been looked at when they were looking at building people that will assist the police, not just recruiting new people who had never been in the crime space before. The second part of it is you need to look at your technology. If you look at areas like Cape Town, and it's actually in the townships as well, you've got cameras in hotspot areas. So when something happens, you're able to pick it up faster, report it to your central remote area so that you can deploy police to that area. At the moment,
the Minister of Police was in Cape Town yesterday. He had an imbizo there. People in the township were complaining bitterly about things that are happening in the townships which are not happening, or certainly not to the same extent.
Yes, that's not the very reason we are asking for this devolution, so we can bring policing closer where we've actually got a
really, because you're saying Cape Town is an example of what you do right, but I'm saying only yesterday you had these communities saying to the police minister.
Mandate, because at the moment provincial competencies are mainly just to move along what national sets for the provincial governments. We want that power devolutioned down to the provinces so that it's much, much closer to the people that they're serving. For example, if you go to police scrapyards, the number of vehicles that are sitting there, if you go to fleet management of police cars, the number of times you'll find police vehicles are sitting sometimes as much as 90 days waiting to be serviced because they have not been paid. And that reduces the number of booths and the number of police vehicles that could be patrolling our communities and making criminals fear because they know that there's likely to be a police vehicle patrolling that community.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to hold your thoughts right there. If you've just joined us, the battle for the country's economic hub is what we are discussing this afternoon, and slugging it here is on this show are the biggest two parties in the province. That's the ANC and the DA, and we had, of course, invited the EFF as well, but they didn't show up. That's why we left this empty seat. But remember, you can also participate in today's program by responding to our online poll, which of course is on your screen right now. The question is, do you believe the ANC will get a simple majority in Gauteng in this election? You can respond by saying yes, if that's what you believe, or no. Or if you believe there are coalitions, then you have a third option there. This conversation continues right after this. Welcome back. My guests represent the leading parties in Gauteng, here to debate their offering to the electorate, but also what they have to show for the respective mandates the electorate gave them in past elections. And here I have representatives of the ANC, the DA, and we were supposed to have the EFF as well. If we may start this time around, Doc, with housing. The Gauteng legislature's housing petitions committee has raised concern about the fact that, a great majority, more than 50% of the adopted petitions were housing or RDP related, which meant that this then, it takes up, a lot of time. Why is that?
It's a massive problem, and it's also by the nature of how Gauteng is actually structured, because you know that by nature we are a province that receive a lot of people coming in for opportunities, economic opportunities in the province. Hence the number of our informal settlements have increased, hence the demand for housing has increased. And I think within the means that we're in, we have built a whole lot of RDP houses, and we've tried to pick up the issue of the backlog, particularly the list that started around 1996-97, which have been addressed. But there are a number of projects that are continuously being unveiled. We've got our mega human settlements in the West Rand, in Ekurhuleni, and this is part of the response. But we know that the demand is continuously, increasing within. But
does that not speak to a lack of planning? Because by now we should, 30 years down the line, we should have a sense of how many people arrive in Gauteng a year, and where do they go, and what to do about them.
We do have a sense. I think for the past 10 years we have been receiving over 250,000 people coming into the country, particularly from people that are moving from other provinces into Gauteng. And that's what we are not even counting the people that come from outside the country. And this is the number that we have. But we know that it becomes very fluid, because while other people do leave, those who get, the houses this year, they move back to the informal settlements and rent out this. And these are the problems that we are facing, that we are dealing with. We saw the problems in Diepsloot, which was mainly because of such activities. In Alexander, we have moved a couple of people into proper actual settlements in Riverside, in River Park, in Diepsloot, and even in Bramfisher. So we are addressing the problem, but we still remain as a hub, as you indicated in introduction, that we're still going to receive more and more people coming into actual Gauteng.
30 years down the line, you must have come up with a plan, if you could.
I want to start with where we need to start. First of all, we need to address the crime issue around housing. Gauteng has construction mafias or syndicates, and that's a big crime area. We need to arrest that problem, for starters. Then the housing backlog in Gauteng, we've got 350 incomplete RDP development projects. So by dealing with the construction mafias and then completing those 300, not houses, projects that are incomplete in Gauteng, we need to make sure that we finish those housing projects and start allocating people and giving people title deeds so they have ownership of tenure. Then we need to look at the Gauteng-owned buildings by the Department of Infrastructure. And some of them, I did my master's on this, and Western Cape is doing something similar. Repurpose buildings that were office buildings in the CBD, and I'm sure you know there's a lot of hijacked buildings that are just standing like white elephants that can be repurposed in the CBD to social flats where people can be moved closer to cities, and so that they don't have to walk more than 30 minutes to get to work. That will go a long way to reducing the housing backlog or need that we have here in Gauteng.
Well, when Herman Mashaba was your mayor, he couldn't tackle that problem.
He started to.
The latter.
He started to. That's why he was brought in the private sector, which is why it's important to have private-public partnerships. But this
and
is
then
why
what happened?
If you start arresting this issue of hijacking and construction mafias, this would be, you actually need to have a dedicated police unit that is specialized in dealing with this. This is why police cannot just police that are generic. You need to actually have a unit that deals with construction mafias.
Well, Herman Mashaba started, and then what happened?
Remember, we were moved out of government, and he left the Democratic Alliance. So some projects will fall through the cracks because, unfortunately, when you get moved out of government, you cannot complete projects that you have started. Projects don't, for Cape Town to be where it is, which we took over in 2009, it took a good 10 years. So you need to start with an intention of saying, this is what we're building towards. So I'm saying there's already these 350 incomplete RDP housing projects. Let's fight the crime. When we've arrested the issue, then we complete these housing projects that people need desperately. And then we look at buildings that are owned by government. Some of them are still empty. They're not even hijacked. You can renovate them and use it as social housing. So people who move from Soweto, Tembisa, and other areas who come into Johannesburg CBD, Pretoria CBD, and other CBDs like Ekurhuleni can actually move closer to their places of work. That will even help a secondary thing. It will alleviate the pressure on public transport, especially when you remember the collapse of our rail system after COVID, where it was neglected and not secured, where people started actually vandalizing it.
Why do we have so many unfinished projects, Dr. Masuku?
It is a matter of fact that there are problems, relating to particularly the companies that were awarded the buildings of those running those projects. And of course, there is a bigger problem of the construction mafia. And it's one of the priorities, that were made by the MEC in the coming, that we are going to be working on the incomplete actual projects, not to even start new projects at all, but to start making sure that we complete those actual projects that were, were not completed. But it is a variety of problems that we faced with, some of the projects that are there. It's not only about housing, it also issues relating to schools, building, and even in other instances, some clinics. But we are, I think in terms of clinics, we have completed 3 or so of the clinics in Kutzong, in Kekanstad, and even in Hammarskraal, which are about to actually to be made to be functional, and this is work that we've been doing. But the other approach that we have taken in terms of housing is that we are going to avail service stands to people so that those who can be able to build their own actual houses are able to do so. And we have started with that project, and it's a project that is moving quite well going forward.
I want us to talk about service delivery a bit. And the DA has been in power in the metros. But many people will say, but we've hardly seen any difference between what the DA has or hasn't done from what the ANC has or hasn't done.
It takes time to turn around cities. First of all, when you take over a city, you have departments that are still politicized, particularly supply chain management, where the service delivery and the tenders allocations come from, that you still have to first fix, stabilize your finances. When we took over 20, it was in the red. We stabilized the metro. We went under administration. Remember, provincial government then put us under administration when we'd actually now gone into a positive cash balance. When we went back into 20, we found it in the red again, had to go back and try and restabilize the finances so that we can get back into green again. So while you're busy trying to do that stabilization, obviously you have an administration that is also in some areas even sabotaging the work that you're doing in these municipalities. Even Ekurhuleni, we had the same problem where under the leadership of Mayor Tanya Campbell, we went into positive, and by the time we started stabilizing, we lost that government. But where you see let me complete in that, where we had a stable majority and managed to govern well, even though it's not a metro, but I'll leave it as a Gauteng municipality. Look at Midvaal. It's a shining example of what DA is capable of doing, because they have governed well for over a period of time, implementing DA policies, implementing DA's way of governing through the blue machine, and have had about 10 clean audits over time, and people are getting the services. So, like I said in my opening remarks, for Cape Town to be where it is today, it takes a lot of time. And I will agree with Ndade just on the point where if you're a successful province or municipality, you become a victim of your own success because immigration is higher into a Gauteng, into a Western Cape. Because if you work in Western Cape and you've left children in the Eastern Cape, when you go back in January, you take your children with you to the Western Cape because there's better healthcare, there's better schools, there's a better opportunity for that child to find employment and better quality of life. But the money doesn't follow from those provinces to the Western Cape so that we can render those services. So now you have, like Ndade says, Gauteng has 250 people in migrating. In Western Cape, we have about 100,000 in migrating. Now you've got 100,000, but your budget didn't increase. In fact, this year, budgets have actually decreased. But you've got more people that you need to cater for in terms of services.
Dr. Masuku, I want to talk about health a little bit in the little time we have left. Failure to, spend a budget at 2.7 billion late last year. I mean, the problems of hospitals, your Rahima Musas and all those hospitals are legendary. I mean, people still haven't forgotten your life as a Dimeni issues and all of that. Do you think we'll ever get it right?
I think we are in the process of getting it right. I think some of the work that have been put in place since we started this term of office has come out with some positive results. One of the major priority that we're dealing with in health was the issue dealing with the staff morale, in making sure that we improve the staff morale and making sure that our staffing, our staff members are actually appreciated in the sector, and hence that will translate into better patient experience. And we have seen some of the positive feedback that we have received from Para and other areas where patients who have been treated and have actually realized that. So the issue is that there will be a process that will be completed at some point. But one of the other important aspects on health, which is something that we need to reflect on, is that there will never be enough money, to deal and handle the issues relating to health. One of the issues that we need to focus on is to make sure that we do what is called preventative medicine, which is primary health care, because one of the key big spenders of the finances of health are related to preventable causes, which relates to trauma, which relate to cancers, which relates to non-communicable diseases like your diabetes and hypertension. So we need to focus and refocus our society in thinking in terms of primary health care and in making sure that we are dealing with the issue of preventing, disease, so that we reduce the number of people visiting, these areas. If you go to casualties now, you'll find a lot of trauma patients, which necessarily are not patients that are supposed to be there.
Do you agree with him with respect to what he says is wrong, or is the problem with our health system at the moment?
I'm going to take my experience from Tembisa Hospital, which is probably equatable to what other people are experiencing in other parts of the province. We need to spend correctly. You cannot have a hospital buying skinny jeans where we have people that were sleeping on the floor. And that money could also have been freed up to look at things like, let me give you an example. One of the questions I had was, in the maternity unit, you had 3 sisters delivering 1,500 babies a month. That's 50 babies a day. And babies don't stagger and say, we'll come every 30 minutes. They could come 3 at a time. And you've got 3 sisters. That means those mothers are compromised. And that's why mothers will give birth in toilets. So if you free up money and use it correctly and make sure your ratio of patients to the healthcare professionals makes sense, you would actually free up those kind of problems, especially when you look at there's a lot of litigation against the Department of Health. A lot of the money goes to litigation money because of medical negligence. So where I will agree with Ndade Masuku is on the basis of we need to build wellness. In Western Cape, we've now started saying health and wellness which is building on your wellness, mental and physical wellness, building high on primary health care, and then to make sure that by the time people go to hospitals, it's really, because it's a referral, it's not the first port of entry for them in terms of their health.
Now, can I come in with this?
Very quickly, please.
Yeah, because there's an issue here that keeps coming up, the referral to issues or things happening in Western Cape. And I think we need to rebut the myth, because we know for the matter of fact that the Western Cape government only functions to service, those who stay in suburbs, who are mainly whites, and they don't really take care of the majority of the people who are in informal settlements and so on. And I think this is just a subtle messaging that keeps coming across, that there are people who feel a bit nostalgic about apartheid, that they want a government that is just going to service, the whites and the minority.
And that's been the criticism of the Western Cape. You've heard that before.
You know what? The Western Cape is not perfect, but I will say to you, as an example, because we don't have the whole day. Why would the Western Cape not care about people in informal settlements, yet go and build a hospital, the equivalent of a private healthcare hospital in Khayelitsha, which people say is even better than most private hospitals?
Very, 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 very.
So I rest
briefly.
my case.
Whatever,
the evidence is there.
Yeah.
It can be. Dr. Masuku is welcome to visit that hospital and see how it operates.
Okay. Dr. Masuku, whatever your wishes may be, you have for the very first time seen that, according to polls, many of them, it must be pointed out, you could easily score below 50% in this election. What are your options? Have you spoken to anybody? Julius Malema at a briefing on Friday told us that they have been speaking to you, and there's nothing stopping you from going to bed with them. What are your plans in the event?
Firstly, we need to mention that some of the institutions that run these polls have been shown that they are actually funded and sponsored by the same individuals who sponsor the DA and who drive a particular narrative that they want the public to believe in. And one of the narratives is the one that we are going to fall below 50, and it's a narrative that we totally reject. We are going into these elections with the intentions of winning them outrightly, and we are not intending to have any discussions on coalitions at the moment, because these elections are for us to win, and we are working towards winning them outrightly.
Are you in any conversations with anyone about possibilities post-election in the event? Well,
absolutely. I think everybody's aware of the Moonshot Pact, the charter that is going on. The Democratic Alliance has grown up. It's very clear that this is the year that the ANC is going to fall under 50%. By the way, we run the best polling in the world. Every time we've done polling, we're probably like a percentage up or down away from what we predict.
Maybe you must just declare those that
it's an internal mechanism that we run through our own research, and whenever election results are actually presented, you'll find that our polling is either 1% above or 1% below. So our pollsters are excellent. Okay. And we know that it takes about 2 weeks to put together governments. Yeah. So we're already engaging potential people who have like-minded values.
Okay, we'll see what comes out of that.
Work together.
I have to say with thanks to both of you for agreeing to come through. Really, really, really appreciated it. Of course, we did invite the EFF, as I've been saying, but they simply didn't pitch. Now, if you still haven't, please remember to scan that QR code at the top right hand of your screen for the poll we are running, which is also live on X at Newzroom Afrika 405, and tell us if you believe the ANC will get a simple majority in Gauteng in this election. The ANC believes it will, but of course other people believe they won't. We'll put up the final result of the poll before the end of the show. Do stay with us. Mkokeli.
No.
How's it? Sharp.
Hey, I need a bow tie, man. I need a bow tie. Dize.
Now, a couple of days ago, I, together with a few dozen fellow journalists, attended a media briefing where the leader of the EFF, Julius Malema, engaged with us on a whole range of election-related matters. Now, true to form, he told us what was on his mind, but also responded to our questions, and, as is almost always the case, dropped a bit of gossip about the goings-on in his former political home, the ANC. Malema told us of the ANC's election target of 57% or 11 million votes in the May 29 poll. The party would have to do better or at least match its performance in the last election, he said. Anything less would mean the end of President Cyril Ramaphosa. Now, one of the journalists who were there was Sam Mkokeli of the Sunday Times, who, after a bit of digging, as journalists should do, came across a recording of an ANC-NEC meeting in which they were reviewing their election campaign and strategizing about where to take their campaign next. Sam Mkokeli joins me now. Mr. Mkokeli, good afternoon. Thank you very much for your time. An interesting piece that you wrote from, of course, that recording of the ANC's NEC meeting. But there was something there that troubled me a little, and that was the suggestion or suggestions that are being made as to how the ANC should proceed going forward. But we will get there in a moment. Let's start first with what stood out for you, which, of course, made your piece the front page lead. What you discovered from those, from that tape, certainly for those of our viewers who may not have seen or read it.
Hi, good afternoon, Vuyo, and your viewers. Thanks for the opportunity. It's one of those rare moments where it's a fly in the wall type moment where you get to listen in with the in the discussion of the top brass of the ANC National Executive Committee. It's President Ramaphosa firing away and trying to really give strength to the campaign. He calls on the ANC members to give oomph to the ANC campaign, and that he's not the only leader in the party. The ANC has got many other leaders. They must go out there, they must get people to vote for the ANC, they must give hope to ANC, potential ANC voters, and that the opposition is weak. There isn't much opposition to the ANC. Same thing you said in Durban yesterday, that the ANC opponents are really biting at the margins of the electoral cake, so to speak. Then the other leaders of the ANC come in and they give addresses, and one of them is Dumiseni Nduli, one of the leaders, the head of election campaign in the ANC, giving an update of where things are in the campaign, right through from province to the most closest to the local level. One of the things it demands of the government is that the Deputy President Paul Mashatile and ministers in the government must come and give an account of what it is that they will be doing with their government positions and in advertising on TV and radio, making big noises about what the ANC government has achieved in the 30 years of a democracy period. That's potentially controversial. Already Mr. Malema told us at the briefing on Friday that the ANC has a history of abusing public office and using the public purse for its own campaigns, and money comes from government tenders, and then the people who get the government tenders would take up to 20% of the budget and service the government, but then 80% would directly go to the ANC. The DA already has a problem too with this recording. John Astini Easton, the leader of the DA, told me yesterday that he already has a complaint to the public protector about how the ANC abuses public office, and will be amending his complaint to the public protector using the recording itself. The recording is out there among ANC leaders, opposition or ANC opponents. When I spoke to the ANC, they say the recording is unlawful. Somebody was trying to intercept ANC proceedings. It shouldn't be out there. And okay, you're gonna hear what the ANC says, but knowing the ANC, there's a history of leaking documents, history of internal feuds, so we don't know where the recording comes from. That's about it, W.
Now, I mean, what's interesting is that, for instance, Transport Minister Sindisiwe Chigunga is being singled out by the head of the ANC's, by the head of elections in the ANC, Dumisani Nduli, as having done well. But also, I mean, it says that we're going to be flooded with adverts from government departments that are going to speak to the successes of the governing party since 1994. That does speak to or smack of, the latter issues that you raised, that are of course being echoed also by the opposition leaders that you spoke to.
Yeah, it is an issue that jars at you every. One, it's natural that a governing party would use or a department would advertise itself and its achievements in a period like this. Whether the benefits accrue to political parties is a different matter altogether. But here you're seeing that the lines are really blurred between the church and the state, and the government and the ruling party, as it were. The ruling party demands of ministers that the ministers must come and explain what is it that they are doing with the budget. That don't sit in the executive office, but they sit in the administrative office. So you probably find cases where the administration is under serious pressure to deliver the budgets, public budgets, for the ANC's benefit. That is potentially problematic.
Of course, I mean, when political parties come onto platforms like these, among the first things we ask what they have to show, for the mandate that they would have been given by the electorate. So one is not suggesting for a second here that it is wrong to boast about your achievements, but I would argue that it is wrong to do so when you realize that you've fallen short and you have yourself to blame.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those areas that perhaps deserve more scrutiny in terms of getting accountability from public officials, not just from the ANC. It's NGOs, it's the media, it's the public paying more attention to these kind of things, so that the public purse is not abused for advertising what the government has done or hasn't done. The government needs to deliver on its own when it's supposed to. And it's supposed to crow about its own successes properly, legitimately, without it coming under undue political pressure. One, it's natural that the government will do things and events around Freedom Day. It's important. Freedom belongs to all of us. The government belongs to all of us and not just the ANC. It serves the public of South Africa. But then it becomes problematic when the budgets they are allocated to services and products that end up benefiting the ANC's electioneering machine or machinery. That is an issue that Julius Malema raises. It deserves a lot of attention from the media, NGOs, the opposition, public protector, and also scrutiny from within the ANC itself. It's one of those things that can actually backfire as well as you're trying to do things. And the South African public has never been stupid. People will see right through something like that. But at the same time, when you listen to what the ANC is trying to do with 40 days to go into an election, it's just grappling with control of the executive office and oversight into what the government does. And it's kind of late in the game itself. It might have some impact. It might also not be an impactful strategy and program itself. So you sense a bit of panic within the ANC as it goes into the election. The numbers it talks about, 57%, that's impossible. It really, the ANC has been dropping on average 4.6% every election, national attrition, bad politics within the party itself. You can bet on that happening again. So you're not going to be able to get the same amount of votes or share of votes as you had last time. But there isn't a response to a message type response. There's no content. What you're getting is process. What are the comrades doing in government? When are they putting me on radio? As Master Ramaphosa says, he wants to be on community radio. The ANC wants to be in the billboards paid for effectively by the government.
Well, panic, you say, but some people would also say a desperation, and nowhere is that perhaps better expressed than in Nduli's frustration that, for example, the April 27 Freedom Day event marking 30 years of freedom has been scheduled to take place in Pretoria rather than KwaZulu-Natal, where the ANC needs to win voters.
Yeah, it's a bit panic, to put it mildly, isn't it? You would rather have the campaign and the resources going to KwaZulu-Natal, where the ANC, you could bet on that as well. The ANC falling below 50%, getting 50% of the share of votes in that province. But it's not just KwaZulu-Natal. I mean, the ANC gets 20% of its national votes from KwaZulu-Natal. Now that's going to be reduced naturally, not just because of the Zuma and MK party. The ANC's top 7 doesn't have a single person who was born in KwaZulu-Natal since the last ANC election in Newzroom in 2022. It doesn't have a single person in its top 7 who speaks mother tongue isiZulu in its top 7. So when you look at affinities and people having ethnic connections and affinities, the ANC doesn't represent a party that speaks to the people of KwaZulu-Natal. They throw in the Jacob Zuma factor, you throw in bad service delivery, water problems, crime, energy, transit logistics, bad economic growth and performance. Generally, those issues that come together, they make it very difficult for the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal, but also for the ANC in Gauteng. So what you actually going to end up with, you're likely to have the ANC falling below 50% in KwaZulu-Natal, Gauteng, and the Western Cape. That's almost 60% of the South African population now that will actually be in a situation where the ANC doesn't have full control over their lives. Yeah. That's the reason for panic.
Sam Kogeli, let me thank you so much for your time this afternoon. He is, of course, a Sunday Times journalist talking to us here on that slot when we look for an outsider. In other words, a person outside of politicians or political parties talks to us about an election-related issue of the week. Let's now bring you the results of that poll. At the beginning of the show, we asked if you believe the ANC will get a simple majority in this election. That, of course, is how you have voted. 64% of you saying yes, it will. 32% saying no, and mere 4% saying perhaps a coalition will win, or rather will have to govern post the election. Now, there can never be anything wrong with boasting about your achievements, as I said to Nkokeli earlier. In fact, that's the first question we ask the governing party whenever they come to platforms such as these. What is disturbing, though, from the article is what appears to be a level of desperation that is going to lead the governing party to use state resources to achieve its goals. Now, nothing in that report suggests that Cyril Ramaphosa and the rest of the party leadership even cautioned against this, which I find rather troubling, to say the least. We hope sanity will ultimately prevail and that the ANC would desist from any wrong, callous act, no matter the temptation or desperation. And that's our show for today. Please do join us next Sunday at 5 p.m. for more of your latest news and in-depth discussions on our road to Vote 24. See you next week.